The ruin of my life started in a rented community room with a slice of dinosaur-themed cake. I was cutting the first piece for my son when my sister leaned in and whispered, "Selfish, just like your mom." I froze. Thinking it was just her usual cruelty, I was wrong. That wasn't an insult. It was the first thread of a secret that had been quietly bankrupting me for years. The fluorescent lights of the Briar Glen Community Center hummed with a sound that I always associated with rainy election days and town hall meetings. But today, I needed them to shine on something happier. I stood on a folding chair, stretching to tape a stream of crepe paper to the acoustic ceiling tile. My arms burned, and my lower back gave a dull throb of protest, but I refused to come down until the streamer had the perfect amount of twist. 72 degrees. That was the temperature I had set on the thermostat. Not too cold, not too stuffy. I checked my watch. It was 11 in the morning. We had 1 hour until the first parents started dropping off their kids. I looked down at the table layout. 4 round tables pushed together, covered in plastic tablecloths that smelled faintly of vinyl and new manufacturing. I had chosen a bright, aggressive green because Leo was currently obsessed with Triceratops, and green was the color of the Cretaceous period. Or so I had been informed over breakfast for the last 3 weeks. This had to be perfect. Not expensive, not flashy, just perfect in the way that matters to a 7-year-old. My life, for the last 7 years, had been an exercise in frantic, silent paddling beneath the surface of a very calm lake. I was 33 years old, single, and tired in a way that sleep never really fixed. But looking at the dinosaur plates and the stack of napkins, I felt that familiar surge of fierce, protective pride. Leo did not know that the rent on our 2-bedroom apartment had gone up 6% last month. He did not know that I had traded shifts at the dental office 3 times to make sure I had today off. He only knew that today was his day. And for a few hours, the world was going to be exactly the size of this room, and it was going to be safe. Safe. That was the word I whispered to myself when I woke up in the middle of the night. It was the promise I made every time I looked at my bank account. I would not be my mother. I would not drag my son through the erratic, high-volume, tear-stained melodrama that had defined my own childhood. We had stability. We had routine. We had pizza coming at 12:30 sharp. The double doors at the far end of the hall swung open with a heavy clank. I turned, expecting the pizza delivery guy early, or maybe Maya, the only other mom at school I let myself get close to. Instead, it was Claire. My sister stood in the doorway of the community center, like she had taken a wrong turn on her way to a gallery opening. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than the entire party budget, belted tightly at the waist. Her heels clicked sharply on the linoleum floor, a distinct, judgmental rhythm that echoed off the cinder-block walls. She was 20 minutes late to help with the setup, but 40 minutes early for the party itself. It was the exact window of time designed to maximize my stress. "Alice," she said, her voice echoing in the empty room. "Claire," I replied. Stepping down from the chair, I smoothed my jeans, suddenly conscious of the slight stain on the knee from where I had knelt to scrub a scuff mark off the floor earlier. "You are early. I thought you might need help," she said, walking past me to inspect the gift table. She picked up a plastic goodie bag, frowned at the dinosaur eraser inside, and dropped it back onto the table. It looked a little sad in here. "It is a kid's party. Claire, they care about sugar and running in circles." She turned to me, her face perfectly made up, her hair a sleek, expensive curtain of blonde that never seemed to move. I looked at her and saw the ghost of the girl she used to be. The one who used to hide in the closet with me when Mom and Dad were screaming, but that girl was gone, buried under layers of judgment and a lifestyle I could not recognize. "Mom would have done it differently," Claire said. She adjusted a stack of cups, moving them 2 inches to the left. The mention of our mother made my stomach tighten. It was Claire's favorite weapon, a small, sharp knife she kept in her pocket. "Mom would have spent money we did not have on a venue we could not afford," I said, keeping my voice level, And then she would have spent the whole party crying in the bathroom because the napkins were the wrong shade of pink. Claire gave a short, dismissive laugh. You always focus on the negative. Alice, Mom had standards. She wanted things to be magical. You just want them to be safe. She said the word safe like it was a synonym for boring. I walked over to the cake box. I am not having this conversation today. Today is about Leo. If you are here to criticize, you can leave. If you are here to be an aunt, you can grab the bag of ice from the cooler and fill the bucket for the juice boxes. Claire sighed. The sound of a martyr being asked to carry a heavy cross. I will do the ice. But honestly, Alice, look at this place. It smells like bleach and desperation. I ignored her. I focused on the cake. It was a sheet cake from the grocery store bakery, but I had customized it. I had bought plastic dinosaur figurines and arranged a prehistoric battle scene on the green frosting. It looked good. It looked fun. The guests began to arrive at noon. The room filled with the chaotic, high-pitched energy of 15 second graders. The noise level rose to a dull roar, a mix of shrieking laughter and the stomping of light-up sneakers. I moved through the crowd, pouring juice, mediating disputes over balloons, and wiping sticky hands. For an hour, I was successful. I was the conductor of the orchestra. Leo was laughing, his face flushed with excitement, wearing a paper crown that sat crooked on his head. He looked happy. He looked unburdened. Claire stood near the back wall, holding a cup of punch like it was toxic waste. She smiled at the other parents. A tight, polite expression that did not reach her eyes. I saw her checking her phone constantly. Bored, detached. Then came the cake. I gathered the kids around the table. The lights were dimmed, and the parents huddled in the back. Phones raised to capture the moment. We sang the song. Leo's eyes were wide in the candlelight, reflecting the tiny flames. He blew them out in one big, forceful breath, and the room cheered. I picked up the knife. It was a large, serrated server I had brought from home. Okay, birthday boy, I said, my voice bright. Which piece do you want? Leo pointed immediately to the corner piece, the one with the large plastic T-Rex and a massive flower of green frosting. That one, he shouted. I laughed. The corner piece, the best piece. I sliced into the cake. The knife slid through the frosting and the sponge. I leveraged the slice onto a paper plate, making sure the T-Rex didn't topple over. I handed the plate to my son. Here you go. Baby, first piece for the birthday boy. The room was quiet. That lull between the singing and the eating, and then, cutting through the silence like a glass shattering, came Claire's voice. Selfish. I froze. The knife was still in my hand, hovering over the cake. I looked up. Claire was standing right behind Leo's chair. She wasn't whispering. She was speaking in a normal, conversational tone that carried perfectly in the sudden quiet of the room, just like your mom, she said. She let out a sharp, short laugh. It was a terrible sound. It wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a bark of derision. The room went still for half a second. The other parents shifted uncomfortably. A child near the front giggled, unsure if it was a joke. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart hammered against my ribs. Selfish, just like your mom. That sentence was not just an insult. It was a landmine. It was the phrase our father used to mutter when our mother bought new curtains instead of paying the electric bill. It was the phrase Claire used when I moved out at 18 to go to community college instead of staying home to help manage the chaos. It was the narrative of my entire life, written by a family that needed a scapegoat to explain why we were always sinking. I looked at Claire. She was smiling, a tight, vicious little smile. She was challenging me. She wanted me to snap. She wanted me to throw the cake server. She wanted me to prove her right, that I was unstable, emotional, messy, just like Mom. I looked down at Leo. He was holding his plate, looking from me to Claire, confusion clouding his happy face. He didn't understand the subtext, but he understood the tension. He sensed the danger. I could not let him see it. I forced the muscles in my face to move. I pulled my lips back into a smile that felt like it might crack the skin. I ignored her. I physically turned my body away from my sister. "Who wants the piece with the volcano?" I asked, my voice pitching up a little too high, a little too brittle. "Me! Me!" the kids screamed, the tension breaking as their desire for sugar overrode the strange mood of the adults. I started cutting, slice after slice. My hands were shaking. I could feel the vibration traveling up my arm, but I kept moving. Plate, napkin, fork, plate, napkin, fork. I did not look at Claire. I did not look at the other parents, who were now exchanging glances, whispering behind their hands. I focused on the cake. I destroyed the landscape I had created, reducing the prehistoric battle to crumbs and frosting. Once the kids were settled at the tables, eating, I moved to the gift table to organize the presents. I needed a moment to breathe. I needed to be away from the center of the room. I felt a presence at my elbow, the scent of expensive perfume, sandalwood and cold florals, washed over me. "You always take the first piece." "Alice," Claire whispered. I kept my eyes on the gift bags. I was arranging them by size, my fingers gripping the glossy paper handles tight enough to leave indentations. "Go away." "Claire," I hissed, barely moving my lips. "You think you are so noble," she continued, her voice dropping lower, a venomous purr, playing the martyr. "But you are just like her. You take the attention. You take the help. You take the money." I turned to her then. "What money? I work for everything I have. I have never asked you for a dime." Claire raised an eyebrow. She picked up a gift bag, inspecting the tag. "Oh, Alice, you have no idea. Do you? The family is still paying for your choices. We are all still paying." She dropped the bag back onto the table. It made a soft thud. "Enjoy the pizza, Alice. Try not to choke on it." She turned and walked away, heading toward the exit without saying goodbye to Leo. I stood there, vibrating. My hands were trembling so badly I had to press them flat against the table to stop them. "Alice?" I jumped. It was Maya. She was holding a trash bag, her face soft with concern. "Hey," Maya said gently. "You okay?" "Your sister." That was intense. I swallowed hard, trying to dislodge the lump in my throat. "I am fine. She is having a hard time." Maya did not buy it. She looked at my hands, still pressed against the table. "Why don't you go sit with Leo?" she suggested. "I will handle the cleanup. Seriously, go." I wanted to say yes. I wanted to collapse into a chair and weep, but I couldn't. "No," I said, straightening up. "I am fine. Really, I need to keep moving." I finished the party on autopilot. I smiled. I thanked people for coming. I handed out the goodie bags. I was a machine designed to simulate a happy mother, but internally, I was replaying the loop. Selfish. Just like your mom. Still paying for your choices. What did she mean? By 3 p.m, the room was empty. The floors were swept. The tables were folded. Leo was sitting on a pile of presents, looking exhausted but content. "Did you have a good birthday, Bug?" I asked, smoothing his hair. He nodded sleepily. "Yeah, Aunt Claire is mean." Though, I felt a crack in my heart. He had noticed. She was just tired. "Baby," I lied. "We do not need to worry about her." I began loading the car. The back of my Toyota Corolla was filled with balloons and leftover cake. As I lifted the last large gift bag, a Lego set from my father, who hadn't bothered to show up, something fell out from behind it. It was a small white envelope. I picked it up. There was no name on the front, no stamp. It had been slipped behind the bag, hidden. I opened it. There was a generic birthday card inside, one with a picture of a golden retriever wearing a party hat, but the handwriting inside was not generic. And it wasn't Claire's distinct, sharp script, nor was it my father's shaky scrawl. It was block printing, deliberate, unfamiliar. "You deserved the truth sooner. Check the cedar box." I stared at the words. The paper felt heavy in my hand. The cedar box. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what it meant. My mother had a recipe box, a small cedar wood box with a brass latch. She used to keep it on the counter in the kitchen. It was one of the few things she never lost, never sold. never broke in a fit of rage. When she died 4 years ago, I hadn't wanted it. I hadn't wanted anything. I had told my father to toss it, to burn it, to do whatever he wanted with the wreckage of her life. I thought it was gone. I looked around the empty parking lot. The wind was picking up, blowing a stray napkin across the asphalt. I felt watched. I shoved the card into my pocket. Let's go home. Leo, I said, my voice tight. The drive home was a blur. I got Leo settled. We built a small part of the Lego set. I made him dinner. I read him 2 chapters of The Magic Tree House. I did everything right. I was the steady, protective mother. But my mind was miles away. It was in a storage unit on the edge of town. At 8:30, Leo finally fell asleep. I stood in his doorway, watching the rise and fall of his chest. He was safe. He was okay. I grabbed my keys. I called Mrs. Gable, my neighbor, and asked her to listen out for Leo. She was a sweet older woman who sat on her porch and watched the neighborhood like a hawk. I told her I had to run to the pharmacy for Tylenol. I drove to the U-Store IT facility on Route 9. My mother had rented a unit here 10 years ago. It was where she kept the things she couldn't fit in the downsized apartments she kept moving into. After she died, the unit had remained in her name. I assumed my father was paying for it, or Claire. I had never asked. I had never visited. It was a mausoleum of bad memories, filled with furniture that smelled like smoke and boxes of clothes she never wore. I pulled up to the gate. It was an older place, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The security keypad looked worn. I didn't have the code. I parked the car and walked to the front office. The lights were on inside. The sign on the door said, "Open until 9 p.m. I pushed the door open. A bell jingled. The office smelled of stale cigarettes and dust. Behind the counter sat a man I vaguely recognized. Mr. Gorski. He had been there for as long as I could remember. He was balding, with a gray mustache and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. He looked up from a crossword puzzle. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "Mr. Gorski," I said. "It is Alice. Alice Henderson." He squinted at me, adjusting his glasses. "Alice? Well, I'll be damned. Haven't seen you since you were knee-high. You look like your mother." I flinched. That comparison again. 2 times in one day. "I need to get into my mother's unit," I said, cutting to the chase. "Unit 402. I don't have the key or the code." He leaned back in his chair. The springs creaking. "Technically, only the account holder can authorize access. That is still listed as Mary Henderson. My mother is dead. Mr. Gorski, you know that." He nodded slowly. I do. But the bill keeps getting paid." "By who?" I asked. He shrugged. "Autopay. Comes in every month like clockwork." I took a breath. "Please, I just need to check one thing. There is a box, a small cedar box. I think she left it for me." "Mr. Gorski looked at me for a long moment. He looked at my hands, which were twisting the strap of my purse. He looked at my eyes, which I knew were wide with a mixture of exhaustion and fear. He sighed and opened the drawer of his desk. He pulled out a heavy ring of keys. "You know," he said, standing up, "it is funny you ask." He walked around the counter. "Funny how?" I asked, following him out the door. He led me toward the rows of orange metal doors. The motion sensor lights flickered on as we walked, illuminating the concrete corridor. "Someone was here a few months back," he said, asking about the same thing, "but they didn't have the key either." "Who?" I asked. He didn't answer. He stopped in front of Unit 402. He unlocked the padlock, a shiny new one, I noticed, and slid the bolt back. He rolled the door up. It rumbled loudly in the quiet night. The unit was mostly full of cardboard boxes and covered furniture, but right there, sitting on top of a plastic bin near the front, was the box. The cedar recipe box. It looked exactly as I remembered it. The wood was dark and polished. The brass latch was tarnished, but something was wrong. I stepped closer. The latch was broken. It was twisted, as if someone had forced it open. "Mr. Gorski reached in and picked it up. He handed it to me. "Here," he said. "Take it." I took the box. It felt light. "Mr. Gorski," I said, staring at the broken latch. "You said someone was here. Did they break this?" He scratched his chin. "Maybe. Look, Alice, I'm not supposed to do this, but your mom, she was a character. She told me once, a long time ago, that if you ever came asking, I should just give it to you, not Claire. You—" I looked up at him. "She said that?" He nodded. "She was specific." I looked back at the box. "And Mr. Gorski?" I asked. "Who is paying the bill? If it is autopay, whose account is it coming from?" He hesitated. He looked back toward the office, then lowered his voice. "I checked the ledger last week," he said. "Just out of curiosity, the name on the payment source changed about 6 months ago." "Changed to what?" "It is not a person," he said. "It is a company, or a trust, something called Dunridge Family Services." Dunridge. The name meant nothing to me, but the warning in his eyes did. "One more thing," he said. "The payment. It was authorized by someone else. The signature on the update form? It was yours." I stared at him. "What? I never signed anything," I whispered. He gave me a grim look. "I didn't think so. You haven't been here in 10 years. But on paper?" "On paper. Alice, you have been paying for this room since April." A cold chill that had nothing to do with the night air settled over my shoulders. Claire's voice echoed in my head. "We are all still paying. Thank you, Mr. Gorski," I said, clutching the box to my chest. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. My hands were trembling again. I looked down at the cedar box in my lap. The broken latch gaped like a mouth. I had come here looking for a memory, or maybe an apology from the grave. Instead, I had found a lie with my signature on it. I started the engine. The dashboard clock read 9:15 p.m. The party was over, but the real event was just beginning. I put the car in reverse and backed out, the headlights sweeping across the rows of silent, locked doors, wondering what other secrets were buried in the dark, waiting for me to find them. The kitchen table was the only place in the apartment where I felt I could think. It was a round, scratched laminate surface that I had bought at a garage sale 3 years ago, and under the yellow glow of the overhead light, it felt like an interrogation room. Leo was asleep in his room. The Lego set from the party scattered across his floor in a chaotic, colorful explosion of joy. He was safe. He was oblivious. I sat alone with the cedar box. It sat in the center of the table, the broken brass latch gaping open like a silent accusation. I had wiped the dust off it with a paper towel, but the smell of the storage unit, damp cardboard and stagnant air, still clung to the wood, mixing with the sharp, resinous scent of the cedar itself. I took a sip of lukewarm tea and reached for the lid. My hands were steady now. The trembling from the party, from Claire's whispers, from the eerie quiet of the storage yard, had settled into a cold, hard knot in the center of my chest. I was not afraid anymore. I was focused. I opened the box. Inside, it looked exactly like the artifact of domestic life I remembered. The front section was packed with recipe cards, some written in my mother's looping, hurried cursive, others typed on an old typewriter that used to sit in the den. I flipped through them. Her meatloaf recipe, stained with tomato sauce on the corner. The lemon bars she made for church bake sales. A card for emergency chicken casserole that just said, "Call Pizza Hut" in my father's blocky print. I smiled, a reflex that didn't reach my eyes. It was a curated history of a family that had tried, and mostly failed, to be normal. Behind the recipes were photographs. I pulled them out. There were pictures of me and Claire as teenagers, standing in the driveway, our arms crossed, looking miserable in matching Easter dresses. There was a picture of my mother holding me as a baby, looking tired but soft. And there was a picture of Claire, maybe 20 years old, sitting in the driver's seat of her first car, beaming with a hunger I hadn't recognized at the time. And then, at the very back, behind a divider labeled miscellaneous, was the envelope. It was a standard white business envelope, sealed tight. On the front, in black ink, my mother had written 3 words that stopped my heart. For Alice, not Claire. I stared at the handwriting. It was shaky, the lines trailing off slightly at the end, written when she was already sick, when the medication made her hands tremble. But the intent was clear. It was a command. I picked up a paring knife I had left on the table and slit the top of the envelope. Inside were 3 folded sheets of paper. I unfolded the first one. It was a photocopy of a document with the letterhead Dunridge Family Services Trust. It looked official, dense with legal jargon about revocable assets and beneficiary designations. I scanned the lines, my eyes skipping over the whereases and therefores, looking for something I could understand. I found it in the second paragraph. Beneficiary, Leo James Henderson. I gasped. The sound loud in the quiet kitchen. Date of birth, March 14th, 2018. My mother had known. The narrative Claire had been spinning for years, the one my father nodded along to, was that Mom had died disappointed in me. Claire claimed that Mom was heartbroken by my divorce, by my financial struggles, by the fact that I was raising a son on a dental receptionist's salary. Claire had told me, time and time again, that Mom left nothing because there was nothing left, and even if there had been, she wouldn't have trusted me with it. You cost Mom everything. Claire had said once, over wine at Thanksgiving, your messy life drained her dry. But here was my son's name, and his birth date. I looked at the date on the document. It was signed 3 weeks before my mother died. She had set this up at the very end. She had hidden it. I unfolded the second sheet. It was a handwritten note on a piece of lined notebook paper. Alice, it read, I know you think I didn't see you. I saw you. I saw how you are with him. You are a good mother, better than I was. Do not let Claire handle this. She thinks she is owed. She is not owed my guilt. This is for Leo. Use it for school. Love, Mom. I put the paper down. I pressed my hands over my mouth to stifle a sob that was ripping its way up my throat. She saw me. All those years I thought I was the disappointment, the failure, the one who didn't measure up to Claire's corporate success and perfect hair. Mom had been watching. She had known, and she had been afraid of Claire. Do not let Claire handle this. I looked at the third paper. It was a statement of account, dated from 4 years ago. The balance listed at the bottom was not a fortune, but it was significant. It was enough for a college fund. It was enough to fix the transmission on my car and pay off my credit card. It was a cushion. It was $45,000. I sat back, the chair creaking. $45,000. Where was it? Claire had handled the estate. She had told me, with a sympathetic grimace, that after the funeral costs and the outstanding medical bills, there was zero balance. She had even made a show of paying for the catering at the wake herself. Sighing about the burden of being the responsible sister, I grabbed my phone. I needed to call the number on the letterhead. I looked at the time. It was 11:30 at night. No one would answer. I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the fan clicking rhythmically above me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's face at the party. Sneering, selfish. Just like your mom. She knew. She had to know. She had projected her own greed onto me to keep me defensive, to keep me from asking questions. If I was busy feeling guilty about being a financial drain, I wouldn't go looking for the money that was actually there. The next morning, I dropped Leo off at school. He was still wearing the plastic dinosaur watch he had gotten in his goodie bag. Bye, Mom, you are the best, he yelled. Running toward the playground, I watched him go, a fierce, hot protectiveness surging through me. I was not going to let them take this from him. I called in sick to the dental office. I had never done that in 5 years without a fever of 102. I sat in my car in the school parking lot and dialed the number for Dunridge Family Services. It rang 4 times. Dunridge Family Services. This is Patty speaking. A pleasant, professional voice answered. Hi, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I cleared my throat. Hi, my name is Alice Henderson. I am calling regarding a trust set up by my mother, Mary Henderson. There was the sound of typing on a keyboard. "One moment. Ms. Henderson," Patty said. "Let me pull up the file." I waited. A school bus rumbled past. "Okay, I have it here," Patty said. "The Mary Henderson Revocable Trust. How can I help you today?" I wanted to check the status of the account. I said, "I have some documents here that say I am the contact person for the beneficiary." "My son Leo." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. "Patty?" I asked. "Yes, I am here," she said. Her voice had changed. It was no longer the bright, automatic tone of a receptionist. It was careful, guarded. "Ms. Henderson," she said slowly. "You are listed as the primary contact. That is correct." "Okay," I said. "So can you tell me the balance?" There was another pause. "Ma'am," Patty said, "I can see here that you spoke with our administrator, Mr. Rains, last Tuesday, and the week before that." I felt the blood drain from my face. "No," I said, "I didn't." "Excuse me? I have never spoken to anyone at your office," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "This is the first time I'm calling." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Ma'am," Patty said, her voice dropping a register, "our logs show regular contact with Alice Henderson for the past 3 years. We have voice authorizations. We have signed directives." My stomach turned over. "That wasn't me." I whispered, "Ms. Henderson," Patty said firmly, "I am going to need you to come in. Today. Can you make it to our office in Briar Glen? We are on 4th Street. I can be there in 20 minutes. I said, "Good. Ask for Mr. Rains." I hung up. My hands were slick with sweat. Someone had been pretending to be me. For 3 years. I drove to 4th Street. Wexler Rains Fiduciary was located in a brick building that used to be a bank. It had heavy glass doors and a brass plaque. It smelled of lemon polish and money. I walked in. The receptionist, who I assumed was Patty, looked up. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind rimless glasses. She looked at me, then looked down at a file on her desk, then looked back at me. "You are Alice?" she asked. "Yes," I said. I pulled my driver's license out of my purse and placed it on the high counter. "This is me." She looked at the ID, then back at my face. She seemed confused. "Mr. Rains is expecting you," she said. She buzzed a heavy door open and led me down a hallway lined with framed prints of sailboats. We entered a corner office. Mr. Rains was a thin man with gray hair and a suit that looked like it had been tailored within an inch of its life. He stood up when I entered. "Alice," he said, smiling. "Good to see you again." I stopped in the doorway. "We have never met." I said, "Mr. Rains's smile faltered. He looked at Patty. Patty shook her head slightly. "Please, sit down," Mr. Rains said, his demeanor shifting instantly from cordial to clinical. I sat in a leather chair that was too big for me. I felt small. I felt like a child in the principal's office, even though I had done nothing wrong. Mr. Rains opened a file folder on his desk. "Miss Henderson," he began, "my receptionist tells me you claim you have not been in contact with this firm." "I haven't," I said. "My mother died 4 years ago. I was told she left no estate. I found a box yesterday with documents referencing this trust. That is the only reason I am here." Mr. Rains pulled a sheet of paper from the file. He slid it across the mahogany desk toward me. "This is a log of interactions," he said. I looked at the list. January 12th, 2024. Phone call from A. Henderson. Requested withdrawal for education support. March 4th, 2024. Email from A. Henderson. Updated mailing address. June 15th, 2025. Phone call from A. Henderson. Authorized quarterly distribution. The dates. January 12th. I was at the dentist's office all day. We had a double booking. I remembered because I didn't eat lunch. June 15th. That was Leo's field trip. I was chaperoning 20 kids at the zoo. I didn't even have my phone on me. These weren't me. I said, pointing at the paper, "Look at the dates. I work full-time. I can prove I wasn't on the phone." Mr. Rains leaned back, steepling his fingers. If this wasn't you, Ms. Henderson, then someone has access to your social security number, your mother's death certificate, and enough personal information to pass our security verification. Claire, the name screamed in my head. Who is the beneficiary? I asked. Leo Henderson, Mr. Rains said. And where has the money been going? Mr. Rains hesitated. He turned his computer monitor slightly so I couldn't see it. The distributions have been sent to a verified account under the name of the trustee contact. He said, that would be you. He typed something. The account on file is with First National, ending in 4022. I shook my head. I don't bank at First National. I use the credit union. Mr. Rains's face grew grave. He wrote something down on a legal pad. Miss Henderson, if what you are saying is true, we have a very serious problem. However, I cannot just take your word for it. We have signatures on file that match yours. He pulled out another document. It was a change of address form. At the bottom was a signature. Alice Henderson. I stared at it. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the A, the same sharp slant to the right, but it was too perfect. It looked like someone had practiced it. That is not my signature, I said, my voice rising. It looks like it, but it is not. Mr. Rains closed the file. I am going to need to launch an internal review, he said. I need you to provide me with notarized samples of your actual signature. I need copies of your ID. And I need you to fill out a fraud affidavit. I can do that. I said, but Ms. Henderson, he warned, his eyes cold. If this is a domestic dispute, if you gave someone permission and now you are regretting it, I suggest you handle it outside of this office. Once I file this affidavit, it becomes a legal matter. I looked him dead in the eye. File it. I said. I left the office an hour later with a stack of paperwork and a headache that felt like a drill boring into my temple. I didn't go home. I couldn't go home. The apartment felt exposed. I went to the library. I needed a computer that wasn't connected to my home Wi-Fi. A paranoid thought that I couldn't shake. I sat in a cubicle in the back corner and logged onto a credit monitoring site. I had seen commercials for it, the ones where people find out their identity was stolen by a guy in a basement. I entered my information, my social security number, my birth date. The screen loaded. A wheel spun. My credit score popped up. It was 620, lower than I thought, but not disastrous. Then I clicked on Public Records. There was a red flag icon. Lien filed. October 2025. Claimant. City of Briar Glen Utilities. Amount, $840. Address, 1402 Oak Street. I stared at the screen. 1402 Oak Street. I didn't know anyone who lived on Oak Street. It was on the other side of town, near the old industrial park. Why was there a utility lien in my name for a house I didn't live in? I clicked deeper. The lien was attached to a utility account opened in my name 2 years ago. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just the trust. Someone was using my name to keep the lights on in a house I had never visited. I needed to talk to my father. My father, Ron Henderson, lived in the house we grew up in. It was a split-level ranch that had been slowly deteriorating since Mom died. The lawn was overgrown. The gutters were choked with leaves, and the paint was peeling around the window frames. I pulled into the driveway. His truck was there. I walked up the front steps. The welcome mat was worn through to the rubber backing. I knocked. "Come in," he yelled from inside. The door was unlocked. It was always unlocked. I walked into the living room. The TV was blaring a game show. My father was sitting in his recliner, surrounded by newspapers. He looked old, older than 65. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. "Hey, Dad," I said, turning down the volume on the TV. "Alice?" He blinked at me. "What are you doing here? Is it Tuesday?" "It is Sunday. Dad, I need to talk to you." He gestured vaguely at the sofa. "Sit. Sit? You want a soda?" Claire brought some diet soda. I sat on the edge of the sofa. It smelled of dust and old dog. Even though our dog had died 5 years ago. "Dad," I said, I found Mom's recipe box. He stiffened. His eyes darted away from mine. Oh? I thought we threw that out. I found it at the storage unit. I said, the one you are not paying for. He picked at a loose thread on the arm of his chair. Claire handles the bills. Alice, you know that. I can't keep track of all that paperwork. It gives me a migraine. I know Claire handles the bills, I said carefully. But Dad, I found papers in the box. About a trust. For Leo. He sighed. A long, rattling exhale. Alice, don't start. Don't start what? Don't start digging for gold, he said, his voice taking on a whiny, defensive edge. Your mother didn't leave a fortune. Claire explained it all to me. The trust had to be dissolved to pay the taxes. The death tax. It takes everything. There is no death tax on $40,000. Dad, I said, and the trust wasn't dissolved. It is active. He looked confused. What? It is active, I repeated. Someone has been taking money out of it, pretending to be me. He waved a hand, dismissing me. You are confused. You never were good with money. Alice, that is why Claire helps. Claire helps? I asked. Yes, she helps, he snapped. She pays the mortgage on this place. She pays the electric. She pays the storage unit. She takes care of everything because you... He stopped. Because I what? I pushed. Because you refused to help, he shouted. The words hung in the air. I stared at him. I refused to help? Claire told me, he said, his voice dropping to a mumble. After your mom died, she said she asked you to chip in for the funeral, for the house, for the outstanding debts, and you said no. You said you had your own life, and you weren't going to throw money into a sinking ship. My mouth fell open. Dad, I whispered, that is a lie. She never asked me for a dime. I offered to help pay for the wake, and she told me it was covered. I offered to come help organize the house, and she told me she hired a service. He shook his head, refusing to believe me. Claire wouldn't lie about that. She was crying. Alice. She was crying at this kitchen table, saying how hard it was to carry it all alone. But she wouldn't let the family go under. I felt a cold rage spreading through my veins. It was so complete. It was so evil. She had painted me as the villain to cover her own theft. She had told my father I was selfish so that he wouldn't question where the money was coming from. She was using the trust money, Leo's money, to pay his bills, and telling him it was coming from her own pocket, all while playing the martyr, the selfish sister, the responsible sister. It was a perfect play. I stood up. Dad, I said, I never refused to help. I didn't know you needed help. He looked up at me, his eyes watery and weak. I don't want any drama. Alice, just leave it alone. Claire is taking care of us. She is not taking care of us, I said. She is taking care of herself. I walked to the door. Where are you going? He asked, to find out the truth. I said, I drove home in a daze. The pieces were falling into place. But the picture they formed was monstrous. I needed proof. I needed more than just a feeling. That night, after Leo was asleep, I laid everything out on the kitchen table again. The trust documents, the notes I had taken at the meeting with Mr. Raines, the printout of the lien. I looked at the address on the lien again. 1402 Oak Street. I pulled up Google Maps on my laptop. I typed in the address. It was a small, nondescript house with white siding and a blue door. There was a car parked in the driveway in the street view image. I zoomed in. It was a silver Lexus. Claire drove a silver Lexus. I sat back, my heart hammering. She had bought a house, or rented it. Using my name? Using the trust money? I looked at the dates on the trust log again. Withdrawal. Education support. Withdrawal. Family reimbursement. She was siphoning the money out, bit by bit, labeling it as things that sounded legitimate, things that I would ask for. Education for Leo, reimbursement for family expenses, and because I was the contact, and because she had forged my signature, the trust officers thought they were helping a struggling single mom. They thought they were helping me. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. I had a meeting with the fraud department at the bank the next day. I had a meeting with a lawyer I couldn't afford on Thursday. But right now, I had something else. I had the realization that my sister, the one who sneered at my grocery store cake, the one who preached about standards and Mom's legacy, was a thief, and she was sloppy. She had left a paper trail. She had used an address. She had kept the storage unit to hide the evidence, but she had stopped paying attention to who was watching the gate. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the Wexler Raines administrator again. I knew he wouldn't answer, but I needed to leave a message. I needed it on the record. The voicemail beeped. "Mr. Raines," I said into the dark kitchen, "this is Alice Henderson, the real Alice Henderson. I found an address, and I think I know where the money went. I am not stopping." I hung up. I walked into Leo's room. I pulled the blanket up to his chin. He turned over in his sleep, murmuring something about a T-Rex. I brushed the hair off his forehead. Claire had called me selfish. She had called me messy. She was about to find out exactly how messy I could get. I went back to the kitchen and opened my laptop. I started a new document. I titled it Timeline. I typed in the first date, March 14th, 2018, Leo's birthday, trust established. Then I typed the last date, yesterday, the cake. I was going to fill in everything in between, every lie, every dollar. Every time she made me feel small so she could feel rich, I was done keeping the peace. I was ready to go to war. The conference room at Wexler and Raines was silent except for the rhythmic hum of the HVAC system and the sound of paper sliding against polished mahogany. Mr. Raines sat across from me, his face carefully neutral, while his assistant placed 3 fresh files on the table. I stared at the document on top of the stack. It was a request form labeled Beneficiary Distribution Authorization. It was dated 6 months ago. At the bottom of the page, on the line marked Guardian Signature, was my name, Alice Henderson. I leaned in, feeling a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. It was my name. It was my handwriting. Or at least, it was a terrifyingly close approximation of it. The way the A looped at the top, the sharp, hurried cross of the H. It looked exactly like the signature I scrawled on credit card receipts when I was rushing to get Leo out of a store before a meltdown. But it was wrong. The pressure was too even. The slant was just a fraction of a degree too sharp. "It is close," I whispered, running my finger just below the ink line. "It is so close." "Mr." Raines nodded gravely. "It is a sophisticated simulation. Miss Henderson, if you were rushing, or if a clerk was just glancing at it to check a box, they would never question it. It is close enough to pass casual inspection, but distinct enough that a handwriting analysis would likely flag it. That is the point, isn't it?" I said, looking up at him. "It is designed to look like I signed it in a hurry. It is designed to look like I was careless." I felt a cold chill. This wasn't just forgery. It was character assassination in ink. Claire hadn't just stolen my name. She had stolen my persona. She had signed it the way she thought the messy, disorganized Alice would sign it. "Mr." Raines cleared his throat and opened the second file. "We have compiled a full history of the withdrawals," he said. "As you can see, there were no lump sum transfers that would trigger an automatic federal review. The structure was methodical." I looked at the ledger. August 12th. Education support, $1,200. September 4th. Medical copay. Reimbursement, $850. October 1st. Seasonal clothing allowance, $600. November 15th. Education support, $1,500. The list went on. Small amounts, reasonable amounts. The kind of amounts a single mother might need to bridge the gap between paychecks. "It is death by 1,000 cuts," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Together, over the last 3 years, the total is nearly $28,000. "Mr." Raines said softly. $28,000. That was a car. That was a down payment on a small house in a cheaper zip code. That was Leo's college tuition at a state school. And it was categorized as education support. She used my son. I said, the words tasting like ash. She used the idea of his needs to steal his future. Mr. Rains tapped the paper. We traced the routing numbers for the direct deposits. They did not go to your personal account, as we established yesterday. They went to a business account. I held my breath. The account is held at a regional bank under the name C. Henderson Consulting. Mr. Rains said. I stared at him. C. Henderson Consulting. I had never heard those words spoken aloud in my life. Claire worked in marketing. She had a job at a firm in the city. She had business cards that said Senior Account Executive. She didn't have a consulting firm. She didn't have a side business. Or did she? Did you know of this entity? Mr. Rains asked. No, I said. I have never heard of it. Mr. Rains made a note. It appears to be a sole proprietorship. The registered agent is Claire Henderson. The address on file is a post office box in West Briar. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. Ms. Henderson, he said, this changes the nature of our inquiry. If this were a simple administrative error, we could fix it internally. But this appears to be deliberate. Systematic fraud committed by a family member who impersonated you to access trust funds. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle in the room. We have a fiduciary duty to the beneficiary. He continued, that means we have to recover these funds. But because the perpetrator is your sister, we need to know how you want to proceed. I looked at the signature again, that fake, hurried scrawl. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my head was clearing. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I need to make a phone call, I said. I walked out of the office and into the parking lot. The sun was shining, a cruel, bright irony on a day that felt so dark. I sat in my car and stared at my phone. I dialed Claire's number. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was bright, distracted. I could hear the click of typing in the background. Claire, I said. Oh, hi Alice. She sounded bored. Look, I am swamped right now. I have a client presentation in an hour. Is this about the cake again? Because honestly, you need to let that go. It is not about the cake, I said. I want to ask you about C. Henderson Consulting. The typing stopped. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It lasted for 3 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Excuse me? Claire said. Her voice had changed. The brightness was gone, replaced by a sharp, guarded tone. I am at the trust office. Claire, I said, Wexler and Rains. I am looking at a list of withdrawals for education support and medical reimbursements. $28,000, all deposited into an account for C. Henderson Consulting. I waited. I expected her to panic. I expected her to hang up. Instead, she laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. Oh, Alice. She sighed. You really are paranoid. Aren't you? Paranoid? I asked, gripping the phone tight. I am looking at the documents. I am looking at my signature, which you forged. I didn't forge anything, she snapped. Mom set that up. She wanted me to manage the funds because she knew you couldn't handle the responsibility. I moved the money to keep it safe, to invest it. To invest it? I repeated. By spending it on utility bills at a house on Oak Street? By paying for the storage unit you told me didn't exist? There was a pause. She was calculating. I could feel her shifting gears. You are confusing things. Alice, she said, her voice dropping to that condescending, pitying register she used when she wanted to make me feel small. You are getting worked up over paperwork you don't understand. I have been protecting that money. I have been using it to handle family expenses that you refuse to help with. I didn't refuse, I shouted, losing my cool for a fraction of a second. I never knew. See? She cut in. There you go. Screaming, just like Mom. The words hit me like a physical slap. Mom always said you would turn everything into a courtroom, Claire said, her voice dripping with venom. She told me, Claire, watch out for Alice. She loves the drama. She loves to be the victim. She will sue you for a paper cut if she thinks she can get attention. I felt the blood rushing in my ears. The rage was a physical thing, a hot, expanding pressure in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her she was a liar, a thief, a sociopath. I wanted to drive to her office and tear her apart. I opened my mouth to unleash every ounce of hatred I had suppressed for 30 years. And then I heard a sound from the back seat of my mind. It was Leo. Not literally. He was at school. But the memory of him. I saw his face at the birthday party, watching me, gauging my reaction to Claire's cruelty. He was learning how to be a person by watching me. He was learning how to handle conflict. If I screamed, if I lost control, if I became the hysterical woman Claire wanted me to be. She won. Her narrative won. Alice is unstable. Alice is messy. Alice creates chaos. Claire needed me to be the disaster so she could be the savior. I closed my mouth. I took a deep breath through my nose. I counted to 3. I lowered my voice. I am not screaming. Claire, I said. My voice was deadly calm. I am just stating facts. You are acting crazy, Claire said, but I heard a tremor in her voice now, a tiny crack of uncertainty. She wasn't getting the reaction she had scripted. I am not the one who forged a signature, I said. We are done talking. Alice, she hissed. Don't call me again until you are ready to apologize for accusing me of helping this family. She hung up. I lowered the phone. My hands were shaking. But not from fear, from adrenaline. She was scared. She had tried to use Mom's ghost to silence me, and it hadn't worked. I started the car. I wasn't going home. I was going to find someone who could fight this war with me. I had found Nadia Kerr's name on a parenting forum a few months ago. In a thread about fighting unfair medical bills, the reviews described her as fearless and no-nonsense. Her office was in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. Miles away from the polished mahogany of Wexler and Rains, the sign on the door said Nadia Kerr, attorney at law, consumer rights and family advocacy. I walked in without an appointment. The waiting room was small, filled with mismatched chairs and a stack of highlights magazines. A woman with wild, curly hair and a sharp blazer walked out of the back room holding a file. She looked at me. Can I help you? She asked. I need a lawyer. I said, my sister stole my son's inheritance, and she told me I'm crazy for noticing. Nadia Kerr looked at me. She didn't blink. Come on back, she said. I sat in her office, which was cluttered with boxes and smelled of coffee. I told her everything. The birthday party, the cake, the cedar box, the trust documents, the signature, the conversation with Claire. Nadia listened. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving across the page in quick, aggressive strokes. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer sympathy. She just absorbed the data. When I finished, she sat back and capped her pen. She gaslit you, Nadia said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. She said Mom told her I would turn everything into a courtroom. Nadia snorted. That is a classic manipulation tactic. Isolate the victim, rewrite the history, make the victim doubt their own memory. Alice, let me ask you something. Did your mother actually say things like that? I hesitated. Mom was difficult. She was emotional. But did she ever call you litigious? Nadia asked. Did she ever describe you as someone who loved courtrooms? No, I said slowly. I have never been to court in my life. I hate conflict. Exactly, Nadia said. Your sister isn't quoting your mother. She is projecting her own fear. She is afraid of the courtroom, so she accuses you of wanting it. I felt a weight lift off my chest. What do we do? I asked. We get organized, Nadia said. We don't scream. We don't fight on the phone. We build a wall of evidence so high she can't climb over it. She leaned forward. But Alice, you need to understand something. This isn't just a family dispute. If she forged documents to access a trust, that is a felony. It is identity theft. It is wire fraud because she used the banking system. I nodded. I know. Do you? Nadia pressed. Because if we go down this road, if we pull this thread, you can't put it back. You can't handle this quietly at Thanksgiving dinner. If I file the paperwork I need to file to get that money back, the state gets involved. The police get involved. I thought about the $2,000 listed as education support. I thought about Leo wearing hand-me-down sneakers because I couldn't afford new ones. She didn't care about ruining me. I said, "Why should I protect her?" Nadia smiled. A grim, sharp smile. "Okay then," she said. "Let's get to work. First, I need to know everything about that storage unit. If she was hiding the paper trail. She was doing it there. I went back to the storage unit that evening. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the rows of metal doors. Mr. Gorski was in the office, eating a sandwich. He looked up when I entered. "Back again?" he asked. "I need to see the access logs." "Mr. Gorski," I said, "and I need to know about the lock." He wiped his mouth with a napkin. "I told you, Alice, I am not supposed to—" "Mr. Gorski," I said, leaning on the counter, "someone has been stealing from my son. They used this unit to hide it. If you don't help me, my lawyer is going to subpoena your records, and she is going to want to know why you let someone access a unit that wasn't in their name." Mr. Gorski paled. He turned to his computer. "I can show you the log," he mumbled. He clicked a few keys. "Here," he said. "Unit 402, accessed last week, Thursday, 10:15 a.m., Thursday." "Who accessed it?" I asked. He pointed to the screen. "The code entered was yours, or the one assigned to the account. I don't have a code." I reminded him. He sighed. He reached under the counter and pulled out a binder. "Security camera backups." He loaded a file. The grainy black and white footage flickered on the monitor. It showed the corridor outside Unit 402. A figure walked into the frame. It was a woman. She was wearing a structured blazer and dark sunglasses. Even though it was inside, she walked with a purpose. She didn't look around. She walked up to the unit. She didn't use a key. She used a pair of bolt cutters. I gasped. She snapped the old lock, my mother's lock, and tossed it into a nearby trash bin. Then she pulled a new, shiny padlock out of her pocket. She rolled up the door. She went inside. She was in there for maybe 2 minutes. She came out carrying a stack of file folders. She locked the new padlock, tested it, and walked away. The camera caught her profile as she turned. It was Claire. There was no denying it. The set of her jaw, the way she carried her shoulders. She stole the files. I whispered. She knew I might find the box. She came to sanitize the record, but she missed the box. "Mister," Gorski said, "it was on top of the bin. Maybe she didn't see it, or maybe she thought it was just junk. Recipes, recipes. Thank you. Mr. Gorski," I said. "I need a copy of that video." I took the thumb drive he gave me and drove home. The apartment was quiet. I sat at the kitchen table again with the cedar box. Why had she left it? Claire was thorough. She was precise. If she had gone there to remove evidence, why leave the box? Because it was just recipes. To Claire, who didn't cook, who ordered takeout and hired caterers. A recipe box was trash. It was sentimental clutter. It had no value. But Mom knew that. For Alice, not Claire. I pulled the cards out again. I spread them out on the table. Meatloaf, lemon bars, chicken pot pie. I looked closer. My mother's handwriting was consistent on most of them, but on some, there were notations in the margins. On the card for beef stew, next to the ingredient list, she had written, October 12th, 18, DFS, 1.2. I frowned. That wasn't a cooking time. I looked at another one, oatmeal cookies, in the corner, November 15th, 18, WRCH, and another, apple pie, January 20th, 19, TRSF, NO. I grabbed the trust documents I had taken from the envelope. I compared the dates. October 12th, 2018. The date the trust was funded. DFS probably stood for Dunridge Family Services, 1.2, maybe 1.2% interest, or $1,200. November 15th, 2018. Wexler Rains, CH, Claire Henderson. Mom had been tracking it. She had been writing down every time she spoke to them, every time she made a change. I flipped to a card for chocolate cake. It was dated 2 weeks before she died. The writing was shaky, barely legible. Beware CH. She asks about account numbers. Told her nothing. If I die, check the red file. The red file. I looked at the video footage in my mind. Claire had walked out with a stack of folders. She had taken the red file, but she hadn't taken the cards. My mother hadn't been being poetic. She had been leaving breadcrumbs in the one place she knew Claire would never look, inside the details of a domestic life that Claire despised. I sat back, feeling a strange mixture of grief and triumph. My mother hadn't been weak. She had been trapped. She had been sick, dependent on Claire for care, unable to fight back openly. So she had fought back quietly. She had hidden the truth in the flour and the sugar. She had bet on me. She had bet that I would be the one to open the box. I picked up my phone and called Nadia. I have the footage. I said, and I have the code. Good, Nadia said. Her voice was sharp, awake. Bring it in tomorrow. One more thing. Nadia, I said. Yeah? If we do this, if we report this, what happens to Claire? There was a silence on the line. Alice, Nadia said softly, if the amount is over $10,000, which it is, and if she used the mail or the internet to move it, which she did, we are looking at grand larceny. We are looking at federal charges. She could go to prison. I closed my eyes. I imagined Claire in a prison cell. It seemed impossible. Claire, with her cashmere coats and her perfect manicures. But then I imagined Leo. I imagined him 10 years from now, trying to go to college, and me having to tell him there was no money because his aunt wanted a renovated kitchen or a new car. I imagined Claire at the party, whispering selfish in my ear. She made her choice. I said, I will see you tomorrow. Alice, I hung up. I walked down the hall to check on Leo. He was sleeping soundly, his arm thrown over his head. I went back to the kitchen. I packed the recipe cards back into the box. I locked the latch, or I tried to, but it was still broken. I found a rubber band in the junk drawer and snapped it around the cedar wood. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't elegant, but it held. I was done being the victim. I was done being the scapegoat. Tomorrow, I was going to turn everything into a courtroom, and I was going to win. The vibration of my phone against the countertop sounded like a trapped insect. I was wiping down the kitchen island, scrubbing at a ring of dried grape juice that Leo had left behind at breakfast, when the screen lit up with a number I did not recognize. The area code was local, but it wasn't one of the contacts I had saved. Usually, I let these go to voicemail. I assumed it was a telemarketer or a political campaign, but my nerves were frayed. My senses heightened to a frequency where every unknown variable felt like a threat. I picked it up. Hello? I asked. My hand still gripping the damp sponge. There was silence on the other end for a beat, just the sound of static and ragged breathing. Is this Alice? A woman's voice asked. It was shaky, thin, the voice of someone older who was holding the receiver too close to their mouth. Yes, this is Alice. The woman exhaled, a sound that cracked with emotion. Alice, my name is Elise. Elise Dunridge. I used to live 2 doors down from your mother on Elm Street. I froze. Dunridge. The name on the trust documents. Dunridge Family Services. I set the sponge down. I felt the blood drop out of my head. Ms. Dunridge, I said, leaning against the counter for support. I saw your name on some paperwork. I know. She said, I know you did. Your mother said you would find it eventually. She said you were the one who paid attention to the quiet things. Why are you calling me now? I asked. Because I heard, she whispered. I still talk to Mrs. Gable. She told me you were asking questions at the storage unit. She told me you looked shaken. I am more than shaken. Ms. Dunridge, call me Elise, dear, please. Okay. Elise, what is going on? Did you help my mother set up the trust? I heard her take a sip of something on the other end. I didn't set it up. She said, I just let her use my name. She needed a name that wouldn't raise flags if Claire saw the mail. She said if she named it Henderson Trust, Claire would sniff it out in a second. So she called it Dunridge Family Services. It sounded like a charity, or a social worker. Claire never looked twice at things that sounded like charity. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. No, Claire only looked at things that looked like profit. Alice, Elise said, her voice dropping lower. Your mom begged me to make sure you saw the box if anything happened. She was terrified. Alice, terrified of dying? Terrified of your sister. The words hung in the air between us, suspended over the miles of telephone wire. She came over to my house one afternoon about 3 months before she passed. Elise continued. She was crying. She said Claire had been over the night before, screaming about money, screaming about how much her care was costing. Your mom said Claire made her sign a power of attorney amendment while she was high on pain medication. She said she didn't even know what she was signing until Claire snatched the paper away and smiled. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. She felt bullied? I asked, my voice trembling. She felt hostage. Alice, that is the word she used. Hostage. She told me, Elise, that girl is going to strip the copper out of the walls before I'm cold. She wanted to leave something for the grandbaby, for Leo. She knew you were struggling. She knew you were proud. She said, Alice will never ask for help, so I have to hide the help where she can find it. I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and fast. There is something else, Elise said. Did you find the life insurance policy? No. I said, Claire told me the policy lapsed years ago. Elise made a noise of disgust. It didn't lapse. Your mother had a small policy, just $15,000. It was meant to pay for the storage unit for 10 years and give you a little cushion. She showed me the paperwork. She had you listed as the beneficiary, and the last time she was in the hospital, the week before she died. The beneficiary was changed. To Claire? To Claire. Elise confirmed. And Alice? Your mother was in a coma that week. She wasn't signing anything. I thanked Elise and hung up. I stood in my kitchen, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. It wasn't just the trust. It wasn't just the fake consulting firm. It was everything, every safety net, every final gesture of love my mother had tried to leave behind. Claire had intercepted it. She had stolen the goodbye. For the next 3 days, I lived a double life, from 7 in the morning until 8 at night. I was Leo's mom. I was the steady, unshakable center of his universe. I made blueberry pancakes on Saturday morning, pouring the batter into the shape of Mickey Mouse ears just the way he liked. I sat on the floor and built complex Lego cities. I read Frog and Toad at bedtime, doing the voices, making sure my tone was warm and slow, giving away nothing of the storm raging inside me. But the moment his door clicked shut, I became someone else. I turned the kitchen table into a war room. I spread out the bank statements, the trust logs, the notes from Elise. I drank coffee until my hands shook, highlighting dates and cross-referencing amounts. I was exhausted. My eyes felt like they were full of sand. But every time I thought about stopping, I looked at the picture of Leo on the fridge, and I thought about Claire's silver Lexus parked in the driveway of a house paid for with his education fund. I needed to talk to my father again. I drove to his house on Sunday afternoon. The lawn was getting long. Claire usually hired a service to cut it, probably with my money, but they hadn't come this week. I found Ron Henderson in the garage, tinkering with an old lawnmower that hadn't run in a decade. He looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders hunched in a flannel shirt that was 2 sizes too big. Dad, I said. He jumped, dropping a wrench. Alice, he breathed, clutching his chest. You scared me. We need to talk about the signatures. Dad, he picked up the wrench and turned away from me, focusing on the rusty engine. I told you. Alice, I don't want to get in the middle of this. You and Claire, you are like oil and water. Always have been. This isn't a sibling rivalry. Dad, this is fraud. He flinched at the word. I pulled a piece of paper out of my bag. It was a copy of the document I had obtained from the trust administrator. It was titled, Authorization of Agent. Look at this, I said, holding it in front of his face so he couldn't ignore it. He squinted at it. It is your signature at the bottom, isn't it? He nodded slowly. Looks like it. And do you know what this document says? I asked. He shrugged. It was for taxes. Claire said the estate taxes were complicated. She needed me to sign off so she could file the returns for Mom. I read the text aloud. I, Ronald Henderson, hereby authorize Claire Henderson to act as my proxy in all communications regarding the Dunridge Family Services Trust, and verify that all instructions provided by her regarding the beneficiary, Alice Henderson, are made with my full knowledge and consent. I lowered the paper. Dad, this wasn't for taxes. This was you giving Claire permission to tell the trust office that she speaks for me. This is you telling them that I know about the withdrawals. He looked at me, his eyes watery and confused. But she said it was for taxes. He repeated, like a child caught in a lie. Did you read it? I asked gently. He slumped against the workbench. Alice, the print is so small. And she was in such a hurry. She came over during the game. She said, Dad, just sign here so the IRS doesn't come after us. I didn't want the IRS coming after us. I looked at him. This weak, defeated man who had spent his entire marriage letting my mother carry the emotional load and was now letting Claire carry the financial one. Regardless of the cost, he wasn't malicious. He was just criminally passive. She used you. Dad, I said, she used you to make her lies look legal. He looked down at his shoes. She helps me. Alice, he whispered. She fills my prescriptions. She brings me groceries. I know, I said, and she pays for them with Leo's money. He looked up then, and I saw the first flicker of real horror in his eyes. Leo's money? He asked. Yes, the money Mom left for him. He brought a trembling hand to his mouth. I didn't know, I swear. Alice, I thought she was just being the good daughter. She is not the good daughter. Dad, and I am not the bad one. We are just the ones she fooled. I left him standing in the garage, staring at the rusty lawnmower, the weight of his negligence finally settling on his shoulders. On Tuesday, I met with Nadia Kerr again. She was wearing a bright yellow blazer that seemed to vibrate with energy. She slammed a file onto her desk the moment I sat down. We got her. She said, What? I asked. Nadia opened the file. She pulled out a notarized document. It was a waiver of accounting, a form that waived the beneficiary's right to see the monthly trust statements. It was dated August 14th, 2024. It was signed Alice Henderson, and next to it was the stamp and signature of a notary public named Timothy Bryce. Look at the date, Nadia said. August 14th. I looked at it. The date felt familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. Where were you on August 14th of last year? Nadia asked. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through my calendar. August. I stopped. My breath hitched. I was in Ohio. I said, Exactly. Nadia said, You were at your cousin's wedding in Cleveland. You have the flight receipts. You have the hotel bill. You have photos of you and Leo dancing the electric slide in a banquet hall in Cleveland. Ohio. So? I asked. Still catching up. So, Nadia said, leaning forward, her eyes gleaming. This document was notarized in Briar Glen on August 14th. Unless you have a teleportation device, you could not have signed this document in front of Mr. Timothy Bryce in this town on that day. I stared at the paper. She forged it. I said, And she got a notary to stamp it. Nadia nodded, which means Mr. Timothy Bryce is either incompetent or, more likely, a friend of Claire's who did her a favor without asking for ID, or maybe she showed him a fake ID. Either way, this document proves, conclusively, that the signature is fraudulent. It is not a he said, she said. It is a physical impossibility. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the smoking gun. Nadia leaned back. Alice, this is leverage. This is the kind of thing that makes prosecutors sit up and take notice. But before we file this, you need to be ready. Ready for what? For the backlash, she said. When Claire realizes we have this, she isn't going to confess. She is going to attack. She is going to try to discredit you before the legal system gets involved. I thought she had already done that. I was wrong. The social escalation began 24 hours later. It started with a text from my Aunt Linda. My father's sister, Alice. I am so disappointed. Claire called me in tears. I can't believe you would threaten to sue your own sister over money Mom left for the whole family. You have always been greedy. But this is a new low. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Greedy? Then came the phone call from my cousin Sarah, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Alice, are you okay? She asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. Claire told me you are having an episode. She said you are imagining things about conspiracies and secret bank accounts. I am not imagining anything. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice steady. Well, Claire said you are under a lot of stress since the divorce. Sarah continued. She said you stopped taking your anxiety medication. Is that true? I felt the blood rush to my face. I didn't take anxiety medication. I never had. But I had gone to therapy for 6 months after my ex-husband left, a fact I had shared with Claire in confidence. She was twisting it. She was weaponizing my vulnerability to paint me as unstable. She is lying. Sarah, I said, I don't know. Alice, Sarah sighed. Claire has been paying your dad's bills for years. She has been the rock. It is hard to believe she would steal. It sounds like you are projecting. I hung up. Then came the final blow. I was at the grocery store, buying milk, when I ran into Mrs. Higgins, the mother of one of Leo's classmates. Oh, Alice, she said, giving me a pitying look. I heard about what happened. What happened? I asked, bracing myself. About your financial trouble, she whispered. Claire mentioned to the PTA treasurer that you might need a scholarship for the field trip this year. Because of your legal issues. I stood there, holding a gallon of milk, feeling the floor tilt beneath my feet. Claire wasn't just telling the family. She was poisoning my community. She was seeding the ground with the idea that I was broke, litigious, and unstable, so that when the truth came out, everyone would view it through the lens she had crafted. She was destroying my reputation to protect her theft. I drove straight to Nadia's office. I didn't care that it was 6 o'clock. I walked in. Nadia was packing up her bag. She is telling everyone I'm crazy. I said, she is telling the PTA I am broke. She is telling my family I'm off my meds. Nadia nodded grimly. I told you. This is the scorched earth phase. She is trying to break you. I am not going to break, I said. But I need to know why. Why does she hate me this much? It isn't just the money. Nadia reached into her briefcase. I found something else. She said, we subpoenaed the internal communication logs from the trust administrator. They were legally obligated to turn them over once we showed them the notary discrepancy. She handed me a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a handwritten note, scribbled on a Wexler Rains memo pad. It was dated 2 years ago. The handwriting belonged to the previous administrator, a man who had since retired, meeting with CH regarding beneficiary Alice H. I read the bullet points below. CH advises that beneficiary is estranged from father and emotionally volatile. CH requests strict gatekeeping of information. And then, at the bottom, a note that made my blood run cold. Per C. Beneficiary will comply if pressured through father. Use R. Henderson to validate all changes. I stared at the words. Beneficiary will comply if pressured through father. It was a strategy. Written down, documented. Claire hadn't just stumbled into this. She hadn't just taken advantage of an opportunity. She had sat in an office and laid out a battle plan. She had identified my father as the weak link and me as the target. She had explicitly told them that I would fold if they used Dad against me. She banked on my love for him. She banked on my desire to keep the peace. She weaponized my own empathy. I looked up at Nadia. This isn't about a cake, I said softly. No, Nadia said. It isn't. And it isn't about sister drama. Nadia shook her head. I stood up. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I am done. Nadia, I said. Done? I am done worrying about what Aunt Linda thinks. I am done worrying about the PTA. I am done trying to protect my son from the fact that his aunt is a predator. What are you going to do? I am going to file the police report, I said, and I am going to sue her. Not for the money, but for the record. Nadia smiled. I will have the paperwork ready in the morning. I drove home. The sun was setting, turning the sky a bruised purple. I walked into the apartment. Leo was watching cartoons. Hey, buddy, I said. Hi, Mom. I went into the kitchen. I made dinner. I washed the dishes. I put Leo to bed. Then I went to my room and pulled out the cedar box. I took the rubber band off. I took out the note from my mother, for Alice, not Claire. I placed the per ch memo next to it. The two documents told the whole story. One was a testament of love and protection. The other was a blueprint for destruction. I finally understood why Mom had been so scared. She had seen the cold, calculating machine beneath Claire's perfect exterior. She had known that Claire wouldn't just take the money. She would try to take my dignity too. But Mom had left me the map, and Claire had left me the ammunition. I wasn't the messy sister anymore. I wasn't the selfish daughter. I was the one with the receipts, and tomorrow, I was going to cash them in. The morning I walked back into the offices of Wexler and Rains, I did not feel like a petitioner. I felt like a prosecutor. I carried a canvas tote bag, the kind I usually filled with library books and snacks for Leo. Today, it contained the dismantling of my sister's life. Inside were the notarized affidavit from my attorney, the security footage from the storage unit on a thumb drive, the recipe cards with my mother's coded notes, and the travel receipts proving I was in Cleveland the day I allegedly signed a waiver in Briar Glen. Mr. Rains met me in the conference room. He looked tired. I suspected he had not slept much since our last meeting, likely realizing that his firm had been facilitating a felony for 3 years. I laid the documents out on the table. I did not throw them. I placed them with the deliberate care of a blackjack dealer showing a winning hand. Here is the signature comparison, I said, sliding the first paper across the mahogany. Here is the log from the storage unit showing the lock was cut. And here is the flight manifest from United Airlines, showing I was at 30,000 feet when your notary claims I was in your office. Mr. Rains picked up the flight receipt. He stared at it for a long time. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the hum of the ventilation system. Ms. Henderson, he said finally, placing the paper down. This is unequivocal. I want the account frozen. I said, I want every penny that is left locked down, and I want a full forensic accounting of where the outgoing transfers went, specifically the ones to C. Henderson Consulting. Done, he said immediately. I have already flagged the account. No further withdrawals will be authorized. We are initiating a fraud protocol review this afternoon. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not for me, but for himself, for his firm. I should warn you, he added, his voice dropping. When we freeze the account, the authorized contact, your sister, will be notified. The system sends an automatic alert. I know. I said, I am counting on it. I left the office and drove straight to Leo's school. I needed to see him. I needed to remind myself why I was doing this. I watched from the car as his class played kickball during recess. He was running toward third base, his arms pumping, laughing at something a friend shouted. He was innocent. He was oblivious. And my job was to keep him that way. I went home and waited. I knew she would come. Claire was not the type to call when she lost control. She was the type to show up, to use her physical presence to intimidate, to dominate the space until the air left the room. It happened at 5:30. I was in the kitchen, cutting carrots for dinner. Leo was in the living room watching a movie about singing animals. I had turned the volume up slightly so he wouldn't hear the doorbell. When it rang, I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door. I checked the peephole. Claire stood on the porch. She was wearing sunglasses, even though the sun had dipped below the tree line. Her jaw was set so tight I could see the muscle jumping in her cheek. I opened the door, but I didn't step back to let her in. I stepped out, pulling the door shut behind me until it clicked. Alice, she said. Her voice was low, vibrating with a tightly coiled fury. Claire. I said, "What did you do?" She asked. "I just got an email from the trust. Account frozen? Fraud investigation? Are you out of your mind?" I crossed my arms over my chest. The evening air was cool, but I didn't feel it. I just gave them the correct information. "Claire, I told them I never signed those papers. I told them I never authorized you to take $28,000 of Leo's money." She took a step toward me. She was taller than me in her heels, and she used it. She loomed, invading my personal space, bringing with her the scent of expensive perfume and nervous sweat. It wasn't stealing. She hissed. I was managing it. I was moving it to protect it. Protect it from who? I asked calmly. From the beneficiary? From you, she shouted. Then caught herself. Glancing at the closed door, she lowered her voice to a venomous whisper. From you, Alice. You act like you are so responsible now. But we both know who you are. You are the one who fell apart when Mike left. You are the one who couldn't afford a lawyer. You are the mess. I looked at her, really looked at her. For years, I had believed that version of the story. I had believed that I was the disaster and she was the savior. But looking at her now, shaking on my porch, I realized that the chaos she despised in me was actually the only thing she had. She needed me to be a mess, so she could justify her own corruption. I am not a mess, Claire. I said, I am a mother who pays her bills. I am a mother who doesn't steal from family members. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Steal? I didn't steal. I used that money to keep this family afloat. Do you have any idea what it costs to keep Dad in that house? Do you have any idea what Mom's funeral actually cost? Mom's funeral was 4 years ago. I said, you have been withdrawing money for education support for 6 months. I am paying myself back. She snapped. I am owed. Alice, I am owed for holding everything together while you were busy playing the victim. I am owed for the hours I spent listening to Mom cry about how you abandoned her. There it was. The weapon. I didn't abandon her. I said, my voice steady. I was working. I was raising a newborn. I visited every Sunday. You abandoned her emotionally. Claire spat. You checked out. You didn't want to deal with the ugliness of her dying, so you let me do it. You let me handle the doctors and the hospice and the bills, and now you want to come in and claim the prize? You think you deserve a payout because you showed up with a casserole once a week? The words were designed to hurt. They were designed to hit the softest, most guilty part of my heart. And a week ago, they might have worked. I might have crumbled. I might have apologized. But I had the recipe cards. For Alice, not Claire. I had the note from Elise Dunridge. She was terrified of your sister. Mom didn't think I abandoned her. I said softly, she thought you were holding her hostage. Claire's face went white. It was a stark, sudden draining of color, like a shutter closing. What did you say? She whispered. I know about the pressure. Claire, I know you made her sign things when she was medicated. I know you scared her. You are lying, she said. But her voice lacked its usual force. It sounded brittle. I am not lying. And neither is the handwriting expert who is going to look at those forms. She stared at me, her chest heaving. For a second, I thought she might hit me. Her hand twitched at her side. Then she took a step back. She adjusted her sunglasses, even though it was dusk. You are going to regret this. Alice, she said, you are going to burn this whole family down for a few $1,000s, and when Dad finds out what you're doing to me, he will never forgive you. He already knows. I said, she froze. He doesn't know the spin you put on it. I continued. He knows the facts. He knows you forged his signature too. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You are selfish, she spat, just like Mom. Then she turned and walked to her car, her heels clicking on the pavement like gunshots. I waited until her taillights disappeared around the corner before I turned and went back inside. Leo was sitting on the couch, mesmerized by the singing animals. Who was that? Mom? He asked without looking away from the screen. Just a neighbor. Baby, I said. Just someone who had the wrong house. The call from my father came 2 hours later. I had expected it. Claire would have driven straight to him, spinning a narrative of betrayal and persecution. She would have told him I was hysterical, that I was confused, that I was attacking her out of jealousy. When I saw his name on the caller ID, I took a deep breath. "Hello? Dad?" I said. "Alice?" His voice was shaky. He sounded old. Can we meet? I can come over." "Dad." "No," he said quickly. "Not at the house. I want to meet on neutral ground. Claire is here. She is very upset. I want us to sit down, all of us, like a family." I closed my eyes. Like a family. That phrase had always been code for shut up and pretend everything is fine. "Where do you want to meet?" I asked. "Miller's Diner," he said. "Tomorrow at noon. Just for lunch. We can talk this out. We can fix this." I looked at the stack of evidence on my kitchen table. "Dad," I said, "I will come to Miller's, but I have conditions." "Conditions?" he asked, sounding hurt. "Since when do you have conditions for seeing your father?" "Since my sister committed identity theft," I said. "Condition 1. Leo will not be there. I am not bringing him into this. Condition 2. My attorney, Nadia, will be at the booth next to us. Alice." He started to protest. "Those are the terms." "Dad," I said, cutting him off. "I am not walking into an ambush. If you want to talk, we talk with witnesses, or we don't talk at all." There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the faint sound of Claire's voice in the background, frantic and high-pitched. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, noon." I hung up. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a boundary snapping into place, rigid and unbreakable. I was 33 years old, but for the first time in my life, I felt like the adult in the family. Miller's Diner was a Briar Glen institution. It smelled of bacon grease, stale coffee, and lemon floor cleaner. It was the kind of place where the booths were vinyl and sticky, and the waitresses called everyone honey. I arrived at 11:50. Nadia was already there, sitting in the booth directly behind the one my father had reserved. She gave me a subtle nod over the top of her menu. I sat down. I ordered a coffee. I waited. At 12:10, the door opened. My father walked in first. He looked gray. He was wearing his church jacket, which hung loosely on his frame. Claire followed him. She had composed herself since the night before. She was wearing a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She carried a leather portfolio. They sat down opposite me. Dad slid into the booth heavily. Claire sat on the edge, her posture rigid. "Hello? Alice?" Claire said. Her tone was professional, icy. "Claire, Dad, we ordered." Dad ordered a grilled cheese he wouldn't eat. Claire ordered an iced tea. I stuck with my coffee. Once the waitress left, Dad cleared his throat. "Alice," he began, his hands trembling on the table. "We need to stop this. This investigation. It is tearing the family apart. I didn't start it. Dad," I said. "You can stop it," Claire interjected. "You can withdraw the affidavit. You can tell the trust office it was a misunderstanding. We can handle this internally." "Internally?" I asked. "You mean you keep the money and I pretend nothing happened?" "No," Claire said. "I have prepared a repayment plan." She slid a piece of paper across the table. "I will pay back the trust," she said. $500 a month, with interest. I looked at the paper. It was a typed document, unsigned. $500 a month. I calculated aloud. That would take you 5 years to pay back the principal. "It is the best I can do," she said stiffly. "Cash flow is tight right now." "Cash flow is tight?" I asked. "But you have a consulting firm. You have a house on Oak Street." Her eyes flickered. "That is not relevant," she said. "It is relevant, Claire, because that is where the money went." Dad put his hand on the table. "Alice, please," he said. "Claire has been under a lot of pressure. She has been helping me with something you don't know about." I looked at him. "What don't I know?" He took a deep breath. He looked at Claire, then at me. "The house," he said. "Our house. The one you grew up in." "What about it?" We almost lost it, he said. 5 years ago. When your mom got sick. The medical bills were piling up. The insurance capped out. I took out a second mortgage. A big one. I stared at him. I didn't know that. I didn't want you to know, he said. I didn't want you to worry. But the payments, they were huge. After Mom died, I couldn't make them. I was going to lose the house. He looked at Claire with a heartbreaking expression of gratitude. Claire stepped in. He said, she said she would handle it. She said she would make the payments. And she has. Every month. For 3 years. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Claire. She was staring at her iced tea. Her face unreadable. She didn't tell me where the money came from. Dad continued, I thought she was doing well at work. I thought it was her money. I turned to Claire. You were paying the mortgage, I said slowly. Yes, she snapped. I was saving the family home. Are you going to sue me for that too? I sat back, my mind racing. She wasn't using the money for vacations. She wasn't using it for jewelry. She was using it to pay a debt that my father had incurred to save my mother's life. For a second, I felt a waver of doubt. Was I the villain? Was I attacking the person who had actually saved us from homelessness? But then I did the math. The second mortgage payments, the house on Oak Street, the consulting firm. Wait, I said, Dad, how much is the mortgage payment? $1,200 a month, he said. And Claire, I said, turning to her, you withdrew $28,000 over 3 years. That averages to almost $800 a month. So? She said. So where did the rest come from? I asked. And where did the money for the Oak Street house come from? She stayed silent. And then it hit me. The selfish comment. The just like your mom insult. It wasn't just cruelty. It was projection. She wasn't rich. She wasn't successful. She was drowning. She had built a life she couldn't afford. The clothes, the car, the image, and when the second mortgage hit, she didn't have the money, so she stole it from Leo. But it wasn't enough. Claire, I said, who else are you helping? She looked up, her eyes wide. What? The email from the trust. I said, they said there were irregularities with other beneficiaries. She slammed her hand on the table. Stop it. Alice? Dad? I said, ignoring her. Is Aunt Linda's husband still the executor of Grandma's estate? Dad looked confused. Yes, why? And does Claire help him with the paperwork? Claire stood up. I am leaving. I am not sitting here and being interrogated. Sit down. Claire, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a steel core that made her pause. She didn't sit. She hovered. You didn't save the house with your money. I said, you saved it with Leo's money. You stole from a child to pay a bank, so you could look like the hero to Dad. I did what I had to do, she screamed. People in the diner turned to look. I did what was necessary. You were too busy feeling sorry for yourself to help. I stood up too. I wasn't too busy. Claire, I was broke. There is a difference. But I never stole. I looked at my father. He was weeping silently, his head in his hands. Dad, I said gently, she lied to you. She let you believe she was successful so you would admire her, but she was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter was your grandson. Alice. He sobbed. I turned back to Claire. I am not withdrawing the affidavit. I said, and I am not accepting your repayment plan, because you can't afford it. You don't have $500 a month. You are broke. Aren't you? She glared at me, her lip trembling. Go to hell. Alice, she whispered. Then she turned and marched out of the diner. I sat back down. I put my hand on my father's shoulder. I am sorry. Dad, I said, I really am. Nadia stood up from the next booth. She walked over and placed a hand on the table. We need to go. Alice, she said softly. Why? I asked. She checked her phone. Because I just got an email from Mr. Rains. It wasn't just Grandma's estate. What do you mean? Nadia looked at my father, then at me. Claire was listed as a trustee on 3 other accounts at Dunridge Family Services. She said, 2 for cousins. 1 for a nonprofit. The trust audit flagged them all this morning. The total misappropriation isn't 28,000. It is closer to 200,000. I stared at her. $200,000. This wasn't a desperate sister helping her dad. This was a Ponzi scheme. She was moving money from one to pay the other. Nadia said, keeping the plates spinning, and when you asked for the cake money, you bumped the table. I felt a chill go through me. That was why she snapped at the party. That was why she called me selfish. She was terrified. She knew that if I pulled one thread, just one single thread about a birthday cake, the whole tapestry would unravel. And it just had. The next 48 hours were a blur of legal maneuvering. Nadia called me into her office the next morning. The atmosphere was different now. It wasn't just a consumer dispute. It was a criminal defense strategy. For me, listen to me closely. Alice, Nadia said, the trust is required by law to report this to the district attorney. They have already done it. What does that mean for Claire? I asked. It means an indictment is coming. Nadia said, wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, given the amount, over 200,000 across multiple accounts. She is looking at mandatory prison time. I felt sick. My sister, in prison. But we have a problem, Nadia continued. What problem? Claire is going to claim you knew, Nadia said. She is going to claim you were complicit, that you agreed to let her use the money to pay your father's mortgage, and that you are only turning on her now because the scheme collapsed. Why would anyone believe that? I asked. Because the money paid the mortgage on the house you stand to inherit. Nadia said, a prosecutor could look at that and see a motive. They could argue you benefited from the theft. I felt the room spin. I didn't know. I whispered, I know you didn't. Nadia said, but we need to prove it. We need to prove that you were kept in the dark. We need to show that your discovery of the fraud was genuine and recent. So, I did what I had done all my life. I got organized. I went to the office supply store. I bought a 3-inch binder. I bought dividers. I bought a 3-hole punch. I went home and sat at the kitchen table. I started at the beginning. Tab 1. The birthday. I printed out the receipt for the dinosaur cake. I wrote a summary of the conversation where Claire called me selfish. Tab 2. The discovery. I included the note from Elise Dunridge, the photos of the cedar box, the letter from my mother, for Alice, not Claire. Tab 3. The lies. I included the trust documents with the forged signatures. I put the flight receipt from Cleveland next to the notarized waiver. I printed out the Google Maps image of the Oak Street house and the utility lien in my name. Tab 4. The confrontation. I wrote down a transcript of the conversation on the porch. I wrote down what happened at the diner. I included the text messages from family members calling me crazy, proof that Claire was actively trying to discredit me, not colluding with me. I worked for 6 hours. I punched holes. I highlighted dates. I organized the chaos of my family's betrayal into a linear, undeniable narrative. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I wasn't doing it to hurt Claire. I was doing it because Nadia was right. If I didn't tell the story, Claire would telling it for me, and in Claire's version, I was the villain. I finished the binder at midnight. I closed the cover. It was heavy. It felt like a brick. I walked into Leo's room. He was asleep, tangled in his duvet. I looked at his face. He looked so much like my mother. The same nose, the same chin. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. I am sorry. I whispered to him, I am sorry I couldn't protect you from the truth about your family, but I promise you, I will protect you from the consequences. I went back to the kitchen. I placed the binder in my tote bag. Tomorrow, I would hand it to the district attorney. Tomorrow, I would sign the statement that would likely send my sister to prison. I felt a profound sadness, a grief for the sister I wished I had, the one who would have helped me cut the cake instead of poisoning it. But underneath the sadness, there was peace. The peace of knowing that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't selfish, and I wasn't helpless. I was the one with the proof. And for the first time in the history of the Henderson family, the truth was going to matter more than the appearance. The morning of the final review, the sky over Briar Glen was a hard, brilliant blue, the kind that makes everything look sharp and undeniable. I dressed in the only suit I owned, a charcoal gray one I had bought for my mother's funeral. It felt fitting. I was going to mourn a death today. 2. The death of the illusion that I had a sister. I drove to Wexler and Rains with Nadia in the passenger seat. My binder sat on her lap, heavy and silent. "Are you ready?" Nadia asked, as we pulled into the parking lot. "No," I said honestly, "but I am doing it anyway." The conference room was larger this time. There was a long oval table made of glass and chrome, cold and reflective. Mr. Rains sat at the head. To his right was a woman I didn't know, introduced as Miss Joe from the Legal Compliance Department. To his left sat my father and Claire. Claire looked impeccable. She was wearing a cream silk blouse and black trousers. Her hair was blown out to perfection. She smiled at Mr. Rains, a warm, professional smile that suggested this was all a tedious misunderstanding she was graciously willing to clear up. She didn't look at me. "Ms. Henderson, Ms. Kerr," Mr. Rains said, gesturing to the empty chairs. "Thank you for coming." We sat. I placed the binder on the table. The sound of it hitting the glass was the only noise in the room. "We are here to review the status of the Dunridge Family Services Trust and the allegations of unauthorized access." Mr. Rains began. Claire cleared her throat. "Excuse me, allegation seems a bit strong. Arthur, as I explained in my email, there was some confusion regarding the reimbursement protocols, but my sister and I have come to an understanding." She turned to me then, her eyes hard and warning. "Isn't that right, Alice?" "Dad and I explained the situation with the house. We are handling this as a family." I looked at her. I looked at the confident tilt of her head, the way she used my father's presence as a shield. She really believed she could charm her way out of this. She believed that because I was quiet, I was compliant. "No," I said, "that is not right." Claire's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Alice," Dad whispered, leaning forward, "please, don't do this here." "Mr. Rains looked between us. "Ms. Henderson," he said to me, "are you withdrawing your affidavit of fraud?" "No," I said clearly, "I am reaffirming it. The withdrawals made from my son's trust were not authorized by me. They were not for his benefit, and the person who made them was not me." Claire let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Arthur, she is being dramatic. I had verbal authorization. Alice hates paperwork. She told me to handle it. She is only saying this now because she is angry about a personal dispute." "Ms. Joe spoke up for the first time. Her voice was dry and devoid of emotion. "Ms. Henderson," she said to Claire, "you claim you had verbal authorization?" "Yes," Claire said, "consistently. And you claim that the caller identified in our logs as Alice Henderson was, in fact, Alice Henderson?" Claire hesitated. She sensed a trap. "Well, sometimes I called on her behalf," she said smoothly, "but she was always aware." "Ms. Joe nodded. She picked up a remote control and pointed it at a screen on the wall. "We record all incoming calls for quality assurance and security purposes," she said. "This is a standard disclosure played at the beginning of every call." She pressed a button. The room filled with the sound of a phone ringing. Then a click. "Dunridge Family Services. This is Patty. Hi, Patty. This is Alice Henderson." The voice that filled the room was bright, confident, and slightly breathless. It was not my voice. It was Claire's voice, pitched slightly higher, attempting to sound like me. But the cadence was hers. The sharp pronunciation of the consonants was hers. "I need to authorize a transfer." The voice continued. 1,500. For, let's call it education support. Leo needs a tutor. Certainly. Alice, can you verify your security question? What was your first pet's name? Buster, the voice said without hesitation. I looked at Claire. Her face had gone still. The charm was evaporating, leaving behind something raw and fearful. "That is not my voice," I said into the silence, and Buster was Claire's dog. My first pet was a hamster named Pip. "Ms. Joe pressed a button and the recording stopped. She slid a printed log across the table toward Claire. This is a log of 42 calls made over the last 3 years. Ms. Joe said. In every single one, the caller identifies herself as Alice Henderson. In not a single instance does the caller state she is acting as an agent or a proxy. Claire stared at the paper. Her hands were clenched in her lap. So, she said, her voice tight. I was simplifying things. Alice knew. Ms. Joe played another clip. Patty, can we make sure the statement goes to the P.O. box? I don't want it going to the apartment. My ex-husband. Well, you know, I don't want him seeing the balance. I felt a flash of rage. She had used my painful divorce as a prop in her con. She had painted me as a victim of my ex to hide her own theft. I looked at my father. He was staring at the table, his face gray. Dad, I said softly, did you know she was pretending to be me? He shook his head slowly. No, she said. She said you signed the papers. Claire turned on him. Dad, don't. You know I did this for us. For us? Mr. Raines interrupted. Mrs. Henderson, we have tracked the funds. We know about the house on Oak Street. We know about the consulting firm. That wasn't for your father. That was for you. Claire stood up. This is ridiculous. She said, I am the trustee on other accounts here. I have a flawless record. Ms. Joe pulled another file from her stack. Actually, she said, that is not entirely true. We audited the other accounts linked to your name this morning. The trusts for the Miller cousins? The sheer volume of administrative fees paid to C.A. Henderson Consulting is statistically impossible. Claire's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. She looked at Dad. Dad, tell them, she begged. Tell them I saved the house. Tell them Alice is lying. Ron Henderson looked at his daughter. He looked at the daughter who had bought him groceries and filled his prescriptions. And he looked at the daughter who sat quietly with a binder full of evidence. He started to cry. Please, he sobbed. Please, can't we just keep it in the family? We can pay it back. I will sell the house. Just don't ruin her life. It was the plea he had made my entire childhood. Keep the peace. Don't rock the boat. Let Claire have her way so she doesn't explode. I looked at him, and I felt a great, heavy chain breaking in my chest. No. Dad, I said. He looked at me, shocked. We had years to keep it in the family. I said, my voice shaking but my words steady. You had years to treat me fairly. You chose not to. You chose to let her bully me. You chose to believe her lies because it was easier than facing the truth. I turned to Claire. And you. I said, you didn't do this for the family. You did it because you felt entitled. You think you are the special one. You think the rules don't apply to you because you are the responsible one. But you are not responsible. Claire, you are a thief. Claire's face twisted. The mask finally fell away completely. You are such a bitch, she hissed. You are just like Mom. Cold, calculating, selfish. I didn't flinch. You keep saying that. I said, but Mom isn't the one who stole from a 7-year-old. She turned to Mr. Raines. The trust was basically mine, she shouted, her voice shrill. I did the caretaking. I drove her to chemo. I sat by her bed while Alice was busy playing house with her loser husband. Mom owed me that money. It was my inheritance. Mr. Raines looked at her with cool detachment. Miss Henderson. The trust was established for the benefit of Leo Henderson. It was not compensation for caretaking, and even if it were, you do not have the legal right to forge a signature to access it. He closed the file. We are required by federal law to report this activity to the authorities. He said, we have already filed a suspicious activity report. We will be cooperating fully with the district attorney's office. Claire went pale. The district attorney? She whispered. Ms. Joe nodded. Given the amounts involved and the use of wire transfers, this falls under federal jurisdiction. We are freezing all assets immediately. Claire slumped back in her chair. She looked small. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and realized, for the first time, That glue wouldn't fix it. Mr. Rains looked at me. Miss Henderson, he said, we will begin the process of restitution. We will go after the assets in the C. Henderson consulting account. It may take time, but we will recover the funds for your son. Thank you, I said. I stood up. I picked up my binder. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back at my father, who was weeping into his hands. I didn't look back at Claire, who was staring blankly at the wall. I walked out into the lobby and pushed through the glass doors. Alice. I stopped on the sidewalk. Claire had followed me. She was standing by the door, her hair slightly messed, her eyes wild. You are ruining everything, she said. Her voice was a low growl. You are destroying this family. I turned to face her. The sun was warm on my face. I didn't ruin anything. Claire, I said softly, you ruined it the moment you decided that your resentment was more important than Leo's future. I didn't, she started. But she stopped. She knew. You called me selfish, I said. You called me messy. But look at us now. I am the one walking away with my head up, and you are the one waiting for the police. I turned and walked to my car. I got in. I locked the doors. I drove away. When I got home, the apartment was quiet. Mrs. Gable, who had picked Leo up from school, waved from her porch as I pulled in. I walked inside. Leo was at the kitchen table. He was building a complex structure out of magnetic tiles. Mom, he shouted when he saw me. Look, I made a castle. I walked over to him. I sat down in the chair next to him. It is beautiful, I said. He looked at me, his eyes bright and innocent. Are you okay? Mom, he asked. You look tired. I smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached all the way to my eyes. I am okay. Baby, I said. I am just relieved. I watched him play. I watched his small hands connect the tiles, building something strong, something that would stand up. I had spent so many years holding my breath, waiting for the next disaster, waiting for the next criticism, waiting for the shoe to drop. I had let my family define me. I had let them tell me who I was. But today, I had defined myself. I was the protector. I was the one who broke the cycle. Leo's future was safe. Not just the money, though that mattered, but his emotional future. He would not grow up in a family where love was transactional and truth was optional. He would not grow up thinking he had to buy his way into safety. I made him dinner. We ate macaroni and cheese. We laughed about a joke he heard at school. I put him to bed. I read him a story about a brave mouse who outsmarted a dragon. When he was asleep, I went back to the kitchen. My laptop was sitting on the table. The screen was dark. I opened it. There was a notification, a new email. The sender was unknown. The subject line was blank. I clicked on it. There was no text in the body of the email, just an attachment, a single scanned image. I opened the attachment. It was a letter, handwritten. The paper looked old, the ink slightly faded. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was my mother's. I looked at the date at the top. It was dated 3 weeks before she died. My dearest Alice, if you are reading this, it means you opened the box. It means you found the courage I never had. I know Claire. I know how she is. She is my daughter, and I love her. But she has a hunger in her that I could never fill. She thinks love is something you own. She thinks family is a business. I was afraid of her. Alice, I am ashamed to say it, but I was. She made me feel small. She made me feel like I owed her for dying so slowly. But you never asked for anything. You just brought your son and your smile and you sat with me. You let me be your mother, not your project. I know she will try to take everything. She will tell you that you don't deserve it. She will tell the family that you are weak. She will use the family story to bury you. Don't let her. You are stronger than she is. You are stronger than me. You are the one who breaks the curse. Give Leo a kiss for me. Tell him his grandma loves him. Love, Mom. I stared at the screen. Tears ran down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release. She had known. She had seen it all, and she had found a way, from beyond the grave, to give me the one thing I needed more than the money. She gave me her blessing. I closed the laptop. I looked around my small but quiet kitchen. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a showpiece, but it was mine, and it was honest. I stood up and turned off the light. The war was over. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready for the peace. Thank you for listening to The Cedar Box. This story of betrayal, gaslighting, and the quiet strength of breaking generational curses is one that touches on the hidden dynamics in so many families. I hope Alice's journey resonated with you. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with a family member to protect your peace? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, resilience, and the truth coming to light. Share your thoughts in English, and thank you for being part of our community.